Good morning. Good morning and thank you for being here. I'd like to update you on the threats our country faces and the decisions this government is taking in response. As I speak, a Russian spy ship, the Yantar, is on the edge of UK waters north of Scotland, having entered the UK's wider waters over the last few weeks. This is a vessel designed for gathering intelligence and mapping our undersea cables. We deployed a Royal Navy frigate and RAF P-8 planes to monitor and track this vessel's every move, during which the Yantar directed lasers at our pilots. That Russian action is deeply dangerous, and this is the second time this year that this ship, the Yantar, has deployed to UK waters. So my message to Russia and to Putin is this: we see you, we know what you're doing, and if the Yantar travels south this week, we are ready. And I want to praise the dedication and professionalism of our armed forces. They work 24/7 every day of the year to keep this nation safe. But this is also a stark reminder that we are in a new era of threat. Our world is changing. It is less predictable, it is more dangerous. And in the last year alone, we've seen the Israel-Iran war bring the Middle East close to the very brink. Armed conflict break out between India and Pakistan. Chinese spies targeting our democracy at home. Putin escalates still further his war in Ukraine. And in just this last year, we've also seen Europe's skies plagued by drone disruptions. We've seen Russian incursions into NATO airspace double, and we've seen 90,000 cyber attacks on the UK defence system alone. This is a new era of threat. It demands a new era for defence, an era of hard power, strong allies, and of sure diplomacy. And as the threat grows, Britain must step up, and we are. Earlier this year, the Prime Minister said security and defence, and I quote, is now the central organising principle of government, the pillar on which everything else stands or falls. And I have to tell you, I'm proud to be part of a government that knows our first duty is to protect the nation and keep our citizens safe. A government that has made a historic commitment to increasing defence investment, because our national security does not come for free. So today I will set out how the choices being made by this government before, during and beyond the budget are essential to match these rising threats, how the fantasy savings promised by opposition parties and their record of undermining defence would leave Britain underprotected, and also how this investment comes with a fundamentally new Labour approach, a defence dividend that is all British industry, British jobs, British communities. Now, back in opposition, the then Defence Secretary Ben Wallace admitted his government had hollowed out and underfunded the British Armed Forces. It was a brutal but honest assessment. Defence budgets were cut by £2 billion, but in the first Conservative year, by £12 billion. That's over 20% in their first 5 years in government. So after 14 years, they left British Army numbers at the lowest since Napoleon, forces families in cold, damp, leaky homes, soldiers on the front line with kit unsuited to deal with the threats they face, and even the renewal of our nuclear deterrent delayed by years. Deliberate austerity decisions. And Ben Wallace stood out in that period. He did what he believed was right for defence in difficult circumstances, and I praise him for his honesty. But his admission, hollowed out, underfunded, was an admission that every single one of those Conservative ministers should have made. Our public services, our communities, our industrial base were all hollowed out, all underfunded over those 14 Conservative years. And today, ahead of the budget, the opposition are proposing more of the same. 47 billion in fantasy savings, which they never delivered in government, which means 47 billion of Conservative cuts. They don't learn, but the public do, and the public know the damage the Conservatives did. Deep cuts to our defence budgets, deep cutbacks in our NHS, driven by failed economic policies with low growth, cuts to investment, and the mini-budget. This is the Conservative political playbook. They did it before, they would do it again. And with this Labour government, we are not going back. Because we were elected last year on a promise of change, to halt Britain's decline, to set the foundations for renewal, and to build Britain's future based on greater security and growth. That's why we've chosen the Labour priorities: to fix our health service, to strengthen our defence. We're delivering the change that Conservative ministers did not, and that no Conservative government will. Labour change, powered by Labour values with a vision of future British success. It's in our first year in government. We brought in the largest pay rise our forces have seen for more than 20 years, the biggest increase in defence spending since the end of the Cold War, the end of the worst ever Tory privatisation, bringing back into public ownership 36,000 military family homes, and the deepest reforms to defence in 50 years, and the first of its kind strategic defence review, so we can accelerate the transformation and the innovation that's necessary to meet these threats in future. And the Chancellor's decisions at this budget will protect those choices into the future, to make Britain safer, more secure at home, stronger abroad. And there is a double purpose to this new defence investment, a double prize for our security and for our economy. First, we are developing with allies a new deal for European security, a new deal that's built on a strong, secure, sovereign Ukraine, on stronger, more integrated NATO, on European nations innovating at a wartime pace. Put simply, we're getting on with the job that the British people need us and elected us to do. You know, when I became Defence Secretary last year, there was no coalition of the willing for Ukraine. There is now. There was no UK-EU defence partnership. There is now. There was no UK leadership of the Ukraine Contact Group, no Trinity House agreement with Germany, no reboot of the Lancaster House Agreement and Treaty with France. There is now. And this is Britain, leading from the front, politically, militarily, industrially, making allies our strategic strength, making our deterrence stronger, so Britain is safer and the British people are better off. And the second purpose and pride of our record defence investment, we're making defence the engine for economic growth, securing a defence dividend for working people, measured in good jobs, growing businesses and new skills right across the UK. This is a fundamental shift from the failed approach of the past. Because in this government, every department must be a growth department. For too long, we've seen areas like mine in South Yorkshire, proud, industrial heartlands, see jobs go and not come back. For too long, Tory ministers were unconcerned where UK defence contracts were going, too ready to let the military buy the latest foreign kit at the cost of jobs and benefits to Britain. We are changing that. Look at South Yorkshire, where we brought back artillery manufacturing into Britain for the first time in a generation. Look at Barrow, more than 1,000 extra jobs since the last election alone. Look at Sheffield Force-Marshals, in public ownership and now expanding steel production. 70% of this investment, of these jobs, is outside London and the South East. So this is not just a promise or a plan for tomorrow. These are good jobs being created today. And this doesn't just happen. This is our Labour government choice. directing more defence investment to British jobs, to British firms and to British innovation. So you can see, since the election last July, we've signed over 1,000 major contracts, of which 86% are with British firms. We've generated 1.7 billion in foreign direct investment into British defence, and we've won new export deals, £10 billion for warships to Norway, £8 billion for jet fighters to Turkey. And today I can announce a new programme to build the factories for the future. 13 potential sites to manufacture the munitions and explosives, with construction and diggers in the ground set to start next year. 1.5 billion of new investment in this Parliament, creating over 1,000 new British jobs. To rearm Britain, to renew our industry, to raise the warfighting readiness of our armed forces. Because we know Britain's defence industry has a long, proud history. In the 1930s, workers from Coventry to Tyneside, from Belfast to Cardiff, went to work building the Spitfires that won the Battle of Britain, building the destroyers that won the Battle of the Atlantic. And those workers knew they were part of something bigger. And I tell you, I see the same sense of pride and purpose in the eyes of our shipbuilders on the Clyde, our engineers in Barrow, our coders in Stevenage, our apprentices in Derby, because they know that their long-term future is secured by our long-term investment. Security, prosperity, we build it here in Britain. But we must also innovate, because technology is changing the nature of warfare now faster than at any time in human history. So alongside the heavy metal of planes, ships, munitions, we will accelerate the power of drones, of AI, of autonomy, so that we give our British Armed Forces the advantage on the battlefield. So that's why later today I'll be in Plymouth, opening a new Helsing factory where they make sea and undersea drones. And if we look forward in 5 years' time, in opposition, Keir Starmer made that commitment to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence. We're delivering it 3 years earlier than anyone expected. We made a clear NATO-first commitment. We're delivering it. We said we would reset relations with European allies. We're delivering it. We promised more British-based defence investment. We are delivering it. And the Chancellor's decisions at this budget are part of making Britain safer, stronger and more successful. So within this Parliament, I want Britain to become the best place to invest and grow a defence business. I want Britain's armed forces to be the fastest innovating military in NATO. I want the British government investment matched by rising private investment. And I want communities right across Britain to see working people with new skills, new jobs, new hope for their families and for their future. Only Labour has this belief in the extraordinary strengths of Great Britain. The Tories will cut defence again. The Greens want to pull us out of NATO. The SNP spurn the proud Scottish defence industry. And Nigel Farage, he's soft on Putin, weak on NATO, and not to be trusted on national security. It's Labour that is the party of defence. It was Labour that chose NATO. It was Labour that established our UK nuclear deterrent. And today, it is Labour choosing to make our country safer still, while bringing that defence dividend to every part of Britain. And only Labour can do this, because we know at the heart of defence, military and industrial, have always been the working class. So like those who came before us, we rearm in the face of threats, we confront dictators, and we boost our defence industry. And in the process, we can unite our country around this common purpose. That's what this budget will be about. Strong foundations to secure Britain's future. A Labour government delivering for defence, delivering for Britain. Thank you. So I'll now take questions, if I may, and can I start with Carl from ITV? Have we got a mic?
Apparently we're using the ones overhead, Secretary.
Very good, very good.
Thanks very much. Secretary of State, you're asking the British taxpayer to put more money into defence. The Defence Committee says, though, that you need to be clearer with the public about the level of threat and what to expect in the event of a conflict. Can you be straight with people now whose money you're going to spend? What is the level of threat? How close are we to conflict? And what should they expect?
So I started this speech at the press conference by setting out the immediate threat that we have from Russian spy ships. I set out the scale of cyber attacks that have been in this last year against the defence systems alone. I pointed to the way that Russia isn't just raising the stakes in Ukraine, there's rising aggression against NATO as well. And we've seen across a range of different parts of the world, greater conflict, less predictability, greater danger. That's why we went to the election promising the British people that we would raise defence spending to 2.5% of GDP, a level we've not seen in this country since Labour was last in government in 2010. We're putting £5 billion into the defence budget in this year alone. We'll hit that 2.6% of NATO GDP by 2027. We've got an ambition to make that 3% in the next Parliament, and we, like the other 31 nations of NATO, have signed up to a 5% target for core defence and national security. This reflects the new era of threat. It reflects the requirement for a new era for defence, and it recognises Britain's role, stepping up with other European nations on Ukraine and on NATO, because our strength is our work with allies, which is why we made the promise at the election. You've seen it delivered since, that Britain, under Labour, has reset our relations with Europe. Ben Wright, BBC.
Thank you, Mr. Healy. I mean, the German government has said that they believe Russia could attack NATO within 5 years. Do you agree with that assessment? And if you look at the spending in Germany or Poland, they're ramping it up much faster than we are. The budget's coming up. Do you need more money quickly from the Treasury to put Britain on a war footing? And can this effort be done, be candid with people, without taxes going up?
We can't turn around the problems of the last 14 years overnight. We produced the Strategic Defence Review precisely to give us that vision for the future, to set out the challenges of transforming our armed forces, to make them more ready to fight still, more capable to deter, alongside NATO allies. We set out that NATO first commitment because we recognise that Britain won't fight alone, we won't deter alone, but we have to lead the way, and we have to do so with allies. And it's that long-term commitment, that certain decade of rising defence investment, that has meant that we've now also seen the rising levels of private investment. And so I, in the last year, have spent as much time with investors as I have with industry. I've spent as much time with innovating small firms that hold the key for future capabilities that keep us ahead of our adversaries that I have with the traditional defence businesses. And it's that combination of fresh investment, transformation, and a vision that sees the strength of our British industry as essential to equipping our armed forces and essential to providing a greater deterrence against anybody that would attack us in the future. Ellen Milligan, Bloomberg, please.
Thank you. Can you give us more detail on the Russian ship pointing lasers at our pilots? How much of an escalation is that? And on the EU Safe Weapons Fund, was any progress made last night at the dinner between the Prime Minister, Germany and France? And with the deadline coming next week, is no deal better than a bad deal?
So on the Yantar, this is the second time in a year that it's entered UK waters. It is part of a Russian fleet designed to put and hold our undersea infrastructure and those of our allies at risk. It isn't just a naval operation, it's part of a Russian program driven by what they call the Main Directorate of Deep Sea Research, or GUGI. And this is designed to have capabilities which can undertake surveillance in peacetime and sabotage in conflict. And that is why we've been determined, whenever the Yantar comes into British wider waters, we track it, we deter it, and we say to Putin, we are ready, and we do that alongside allies. You saw this last year in the way that Britain led the response to attacks on critical infrastructure with other Baltic and Nordic nations, and then NATO stepped in as well with their operation. So it's a demonstration, if you like, of a British readiness to act, a British capability to act, because make no mistake, we will not tolerate a threat to the British people's essential connections underwater. And on the SAFE programme, we were pleased when we signed the UK-EU Security and Defence Partnership. It was a milestone in resetting relations with Europe. We recognise, like President von der Leyen did, the importance of all European nations contributing to European security. So we've negotiated seriously throughout this period for participation in SAFE. But we've always made clear, whilst we were willing to pay a fair share of the costs of this programme, any deal had to be good value for money for our British taxpayers, had to be good value for our British defence industry. And I hope the Commission will get to the point that we can participate, but whether or not we do, in or out of SAFE, make no mistake, we are doing the deals with other European nations so that British industry and the strengths that we can bring to future wider European security, we will continue to do that in or out of SAFE. We will continue to win the export deals that benefit Britain. We will continue to provide the systems and weaponry and the innovation that helps make Europe safer. Rob Powell, Sky.
Just to follow on from that on the Yantar, is this the first time that lasers have been used by a Russian vessel against pilots? And how dangerous is that? What are the risks? And also, how will the UK government be responding to this?
Clearly, anything that impedes, disrupts or puts at risk pilots in charge of British military planes is deeply dangerous. This is the first time we've had this action from Yantar directed against the British RAF. We take it extremely seriously. I have changed the Navy's rules of engagement so that we can follow more closely, monitor more closely the activities of the Yantar when it's in our wider waters. We have military options ready should the Yantar change course. I'm not going to reveal those because that only makes President Putin wiser. But I would just say to you, look at what we did last time. When the Yantar was in British waters, we surfaced a nuclear-powered British attack submarine close to that ship. A submarine that they did not know was there, that had helped track its every movement before. And look at what I'm going to do this afternoon. I shall go to Plymouth. I shall open a new factory, a British-based factory that has come directly from the Trinity House Agreement with Germany last year, with fresh investment into the UK, where we can start to design and manufacture the sea and undersea drones that will help reinforce exactly the sort of security that is threatened by the actions of Putin and his spy ships like Yantar. Charlie Parker, The Times.
Thank you. What do you make of the Defence Committee's assessment that it's highly likely the US will withdraw from Europe under President Trump, and its subsequent call for Britain to rapidly replace its American military systems?
Sorry, whose assessment was that?
The Defence Committee's in its report today.
I take a different view. The British government takes a different view. The Prime Minister takes a different view, and I would suggest the Select Committee looks at the commitment that President Trump and the US made back at the NATO Hague summit in June, where the US led the way alongside the other 31 nations in NATO with the UK in making that long-term commitment to NATO, that long-term commitment to increasing defence investment, because we recognise that together we need to step up the deterrence, and we are. We need to step up our capabilities to defend the wider Europe, and we are. And we recognised also that security through NATO in the Euro-Atlantic area is indivisibly linked with wider security in the Indo-Pacific. I just say to the Select Committee, the strength of NATO is not just about the defence of Europe, it's about the defence of America too. That was the founding purpose that Britain played the leading part in establishing NATO in the first place. It's as true now as it was then. So I disagree with the Select Committee on that point of assessment, but they're right to say Britain must pick up the pace of what we do in the future, and that's exactly what we've been doing since July last year as a new government. Kieran Stacey, Guardian.
Thank you. Can I ask a little bit more about the threats that we learnt about yesterday coming from China, especially on LinkedIn? Do you know if any ministers or government advisors were contacted over LinkedIn in this way? Do you have any intelligence on whether these are real people or not? And is there any advice that you're issuing either to government officials or to the public at large about using LinkedIn?
In reverse order, Kieran, the Speaker issued advice to all MPs. The Speaker, with the head of MI5, set out the nature of the spying threat that had been established. I have no information about whether officials in government were subject to the same sorts of activities. And the Security Minister made a statement in the Commons yesterday which set out the confirmation about the new espionage plan the government has put in place, and set out details of 170 million in extra investment that will go into securing the communication systems on which government in particular relies. Emilio from Playbook, please.
Hi, thanks very much. Why have we done a deal with Turkey to sell them our jets when they are the third global largest importer of Russian oil, funding the Russian war machine?
Because Turkey, like the UK, is an important member of NATO. Because Turkey, like the UK, is a major nation involved in the support for Ukraine and the plans to lead the coalition of the willing if we can get an agreement between Putin and Zelensky to end the fighting. And because working with other NATO allies together, bringing yet another nation into that group of typhoon flying nations allows us to strengthen that wider European security. to respond to this new era of threats that we face, and it allows us also to boost the direct investment that underpins, in this case, 20,000 UK jobs. So this deal, the biggest British fighter jet deal for 20 years, will secure those jobs for years to come. And then finally, Arj Singh, please.
Hello, Defence Secretary. I wanted to come back on the Safe Rearmament Fund, if I could. The two sides, according to reports, are really, really far apart on this. The EU's demanding billions of euros. We're offering hundreds of millions of pounds. How do you rate the chances of a deal by the deadline in, I think, 12 days? And, I mean, what's your message to the EU on this, given the threats to European security as a whole?
My message to the EU is what it's always been. We want a deal. Back in May, the President von der Leyen talked about a deal within weeks on SAFE, and we've been negotiating at each stage, ready for a deal, but also clear. Clear that we're ready to pay a contribution to the costs of running the scheme. That's fair. Ready to pay if there is good value for money for our taxpayers and our industry. And we've waited weeks within the negotiations for the chance to see the European proposals in some important areas. And for us, we're ready to be part of this scheme, but we're not ready to be willing at any price. And for us as the UK, we have an industry that's second to none in Europe. We will do these deals with other European countries. We will play our part in reinforcing European security. And we recognise that responsibility we have as Britain amongst European nations, particularly those in NATO, to play that role in future. And we will, in or out of SAFE. Thank you all. Thank you very much. And to those of you who are due to come with me to Plymouth, and look forward to seeing you down there at the factory. Thank you.